sports. From elementary school to the pros, it is the driver of many a young person's dreams. But on the field or off, on the court or not, systemic racism, with all its implications, continues to plague athletics at every level. Enter Coaches vs. Racism, a national nonprofit that is, according to Executive Director Darrell Woods, shining a spotlight on systemic racism that is the root cause of the inherent disparities that exist in sports. With a focus on athletes, community, commitment, and coaches, the group is having the brutally honest conversations it will take to bring about real change.
Well, I want to welcome everyone to Coaches vs. Racism, a conversation that is highlighting emotional fitness in sports and honing in on topics that are relevant and pertinent to Black Americans today. Thank you all for being here, gentlemen. We have a very esteemed panel of leaders, former athletes, and men that are going to speak about what we can do to move sports forward, to move culture forward, to move society forward. And I work with the belief that social justice is a byproduct of economic empowerment. And I believe that until we can buy the block, forge equitable pathways, and ultimately reimagine how we define success as Black families, we're going to be forced to rely on institutions that sometimes have misleading agendas for our community. So, Winston, I want to start with you. Black Americans have endured racism for hundreds of years within American culture. And it's been proven through studies that racism not only impacts social stratification, but also the health of Black people, physically and mentally. Talk about how Coaches vs. Racism came about and why now is the time for this initiative.
Thank you for that question. Coaches vs. Racism came about as a one of the social ills that we were addressing in my group. We have a group of athletes that we get together and we meet and talk about life, socioeconomic, and the plight of the Black man. The CDC, Centers for Disease Control, in April of 2020 came out and said that racism is one of the social health disparities in the country. So we feel like now it's not just the problem of Black people, it's the problem of everybody. And everybody has a responsibility to jump in and help. I'm a mental health therapist. I have a private practice in mental health. So we're going at it from a therapeutic lens. We're watching young people in schools. We've surveyed about 300 families. And what we're finding is that we're asking our young athletes to start competing so early that they're having anxieties, the pressures, and it's starting to affect them not only physically, but mentally. So we figured that in this time, in this trying time in the country, that we would enlist the help of some of our most outstanding people, our athletes, and some of our coaches who can help drive home the points. We've been together to win championships. We've been partners in sports. We've been brothers in the sports arena. It's time for us to be brothers in the outside arenas and help us to fight these ills and this dis-ease of racism.
Thank you for that. That's a great way to set the stage as to why we're all here today and this weekend. The question that I want to ask is that the era of George Floyd, and we know that that was a terrible tragedy to see a Black man murdered in the street at the hands of police. But for many, it's commonly referred to as an era or a moment of awakening in society. Do you all feel like that has, and this is a general question to the panel, whoever feels so compelled to jump in, do you all feel like that since then things have changed, or are we seeing more kind of superficial movements towards equity in sports or in broader society? Are we seeing a change now, or is it just more of the same?
I'll go.
Okay.
I think it's more of the same. I don't see a change. It's tragic what happened to those individuals, but if you look back at history, it's the same thing. It's just the society or the people in charge have put on a different cover to mask what they're doing, and they're saying it's progress, and it's really not any progress to this end. And these younger athletes are starting to speak out, but there's so much pressure on them to perform, and the biggest culprit that puts the pressure on them is their own people. We're the ones that we set the standard so high, and when they don't perform at that level, we're the ones that's trying to hold them accountable versus them and their issues that they're going through. We could care less. No, we need you to do. No, we need to help them first.
Well, I like to reflect back on my history. 53 years ago, we made a statement, and we chose to use the metaphor of the Olympic Project for Human Rights. Why not the Olympic Project for Black Rights? We felt that the human rights would circumvent everyone, because it wasn't just blacks that was going through this, but people of all ethnic backgrounds was going through the same changes. We made this statement, and by making that statement and using the metaphor Olympic Project for Human Rights, we felt that humanity would embrace us, wrap their arms around us. But the powers to be that we are dealing with today, which are the racist individuals that's pushing the keys, these individuals chose to change the narrative and said that demonstration was not about human rights, that demonstration was about black power, which in turn froze humanity. Through the demise of Mr. Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, these individuals lost their lives, as you said, and the powers to be had them lose their lives to maybe have us come to a point where it's time to step up, raise our voices. So now Black Lives Matter came about. It was erected into society. When Black Lives Matter came in, humanity, which I looked for 53 years ago, Black Lives Matter had humanity embrace them, wrap their arms around them. You saw around the world, everyone had Black Lives Matter and smoke in the skies on TV, the magazines, t-shirts, what have you. But I feel that Black Lives Matter missed the point, because I felt that if we was gonna ever have any sort of reckoning with the truth, which everyone, when it comes to truth relative to race relations, they want to kick it under the rug. But they had the opportunity at that moment when humanity embraced them to say, now it's time for us to have a roundtable discussion. Roundtable discussion, and I can say who would be on the opposing side of the table. Well, I heard to say the federal government needs to be there. The Fortune 500 needs to be there. The banking industry needs to be there. The Board of Education needs to be there. The housing industry needs to be there, because all of these individuals contributed to racism. Now you sit back and on the other side of the table, there's a few things we like to say. We realize that you guys didn't create racism, but we realize also that you perpetuated racism. You didn't put water on the fire, you threw logs on the fire for 500 years. And now the questions come, are you in agreement with the fact that you threw logs in the fire and you perpetuated racism? Yes. Second question, do you have remorse of what you did? Yes. Then we can roll up our sleeves and we can get busy and try and make a harmonious society for all people. But then you sit back and you say, well, what happened to Black Lives Matter? The same thing happened to Black Lives Matter that happened to the NAACP or the Urban League or SNCC or any other black organization. All of a sudden, a fistful of money came up. Black Lives Matter overnight and had a bank account of $100 million. You know how we are as black people, we see money, everything else goes out the window, I just see that money. But when they got that $100 million, the $100 million was to implode them from within, for them to self-destruct. And then people sit back and tell me, well, John, that's $100 million. And I told them, I said, it looks like a lot of money, dude. I said, well, let me just try and put it in simple terms where you can understand. Go to any beach in America, go to any beach in the world, walk out on the sand and reach down and take a handful of sand and then walk back on the blacktop and look at that money in your hand. Every grain of sand is $1. You got $100 million in your hand. Well, John, that's a lot of money. And I look at him, I say, in my estimation, that's 1 grain of sand in your hand. When you turn back and look on the beach and see how much money they had to self-destruction. The game that they played, the game hasn't changed, just the calendar has changed. And it's not time for them to wake up, it's time for us to wake up. Amen. You know, when I say us, meaning a coach has to have an understanding about his athlete. The athlete has to have an understanding about his coach. When I came through, coaches didn't know, white coaches, they didn't know nothing about the sport. They just came in because they were white, and they gave them that job so they can get that extra stipend. In terms of how to train an individual athlete, that's why so many young athletes got hurt and injured, because they thought that all black athletes had the big S on their chest. If John can do it, Winston can do it. And they pushed us, and we didn't have the mindset to say, no, coach, you're going about this wrong. We had to break out of this symbol to tell them, say, we're human beings. We're not just that wind-up toy that you sent to the First World War to fight for America, or wind up again, send us to the Olympics to represent America. Because if we sit back and think about coaches, where would the university be if these black coaches, if these black athletes did not attend these universities and colleges? Where would America be if the black soldiers chose to step back and say, we choose not to go to the First World War, or we choose not to go to the Second World War, the Korean War, or we choose not to go to the Olympics? Do you feel that the America would be as great as it is today without you? Or the Olympics would be as great as they've been without you? They're aware of who you are. You are not aware of who you are.
Absolutely. Give me some.
That's a tough soundbite to follow, but come on, what you got?
No, I'm inspired because, you know, hearing this conversation, oftentimes the onus on white people is left out. We got to carry the torch. And I'm gonna be honest with you, you say, did the momentum die? It didn't die, it got remixed, right? And so it's up to us. We have the ability and the power if we know who we are. And we use that platform and speak truth to power. So I say when Kyle and I started our program, A Long Talk, it was 2 black fathers who met at Hampton University who had enough, who wanted something of the world safer for our kids. And we said, we don't want to talk to the black people. We told the coaches and we told the university, we want to talk to your white people. Because every time we have DEI gatherings and we talk about race relations and empowerment, the same people show up. No, we want to talk to the leaders. We want to talk to the people who are hiring, the people who are funding, and we want to have a real conversation. Because after the summer goes away, we want to see what you're doing after your statement. We want to see if you really understand this shared American history, not black history. It's a shared American history. And like you said, they need to be honest and say, okay, we didn't create it, but we are perpetuating it. I'm willing to help you dismantle. That means take apart from the inside. And so it's real unique when you have 2 black men talking to all white people. That's what we've been doing since George Floyd was murdered, since Breonna Taylor. We will talk to you and we will talk to you about the truth, but we want you to take action. This isn't no book club. This isn't no movie club. It is a long talk about the uncomfortable truth. And our goal is to put an anti-racist at every dinner table. Now, as fate would have it, we found Brother D. Woods. Winston, these brothers, Coaches versus Racism, to sit down, and they were putting together the master plan, and we didn't even know it. And now we have platforms to say, no, we're going to hold you accountable. You white head coaches are becoming millionaires off of black bodies. What are you going to do? You can't pay me under the table. I don't need the money. I'm in this for purpose. And so when you ask about did it die down, it will die down if we let it, but we're not going to let it because we wouldn't be here today for brothers like D. Wood, brothers Winston, John, everyone that's on this panel.
And at A Long Talk, you guys are pulling together resources to tell the truth about racism in America. What's the methodology you all are using to actually bring awareness to and eliminate racism?
Well, we believe we can educate to end hate. There's a lot of people, the problem in America for most people, they're just not aware. I mean, there's some straight hardcore racists in America. There are some people that fight racism in America. But there's millions of people that just don't even understand the complexity of the issue. And so it allows them to separate and back up. So a lot of what we do right from the beginning is education in terms of having them share the incredible resources that they share, they get to watch, and then we have a conversation. So it's really about having this education and bringing this information, but also establishing empathy. Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that's gonna cause lasting action. So, and your point though, the timing, I could not have done what he did I don't have the patience. And what I mean by that is the timing of it was that the work that we're doing has been welcomed. People are like, what do we do? How do we get engaged? So we haven't run into a lot of the roadblocks because the people that we're talking to are the ones that's like, I think I need to do something with this.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of the timing of now, it's different. Because like you said, when humanity was called in '68, they didn't respond. When George Floyd called humanity in the question, and 25 million people responded.
Yeah.
So there is a different shift. We just have to keep working to keep it going.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear, because as I work in the big tech industry, I see the societal winds trending towards access to capital, access to funding for small business owners, and the conversation is happening. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a very popular buzzword right now.
Absolutely.
So we see that off the back of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, right? And so it's ugly. It's not always going to be comfortable. It's not the way we want it to look, but it's happening slowly. And you said something about Black players being the drivers of the wealth in the sports industry. And there's 74% of NBA players are Black. 59% of NFL players are Black. Etan, talk about, what do you feel like a coach's responsibility is in this conversation around racism? Are they doing enough? What can they do more of? And you have books on this, so drop some gems.
Well, thanks. First of all, it's an honor to be here. I grew up with John Carlos's picture on my wall, and I always tell them that, so it's always an honor. I think there's a lot of issues here that are problematic. So when the world saw George Floyd being murdered, mainstream America felt bad for about 25 minutes.
That's right.
And then went back to business as usual. You talked about the people who contributed to Black Lives Matter. They said, here, okay, now everything is fine, now let's go back to business as usual. The message started to be watered down and convoluted to different things, which are still important, but the main point was to hold police officers accountable when they kill Black people.
Exactly.
That was the point. So then it went into hiring more Black cartoon writers and hiring more everything else except for holding the police officers accountable. And I think that was one way that it got diluted. And I think it was intentionally done. I mean, we saw different organizations, even in their statements, they would mention everything else except for police brutality. Like, this is the topic that we're talking about. George Floyd was murdered. This is Breonna Taylor. We're talking about all these different things. Jacob Blake was shot, all these different things. This is what we're talking about. But they talked about everything else instead of that. And I think that was intentionally done.
Absolutely.
Now, the athletes, it's unfortunate that athletes are expected to carry the torch to change society when you have politicians doing the double talk, politicians that can actually change things, trying to either quiet athletes if they're on one side, or fake applaud athletes on another side by saying, oh, that's great that you spoke about this, but acting as if they don't have the power to actually do something about this in their particular city, especially local politicians.
Exactly.
Because that's where everything really gets done, is locally. And the different police departments and the different, things that are going on, each police department is ran completely different. So each police department presents its own issues. You have some police departments that still don't have body cams.
Right.
Others that have, so everybody's fighting different fights, but it is the hypocrisy and the empty, tweets and the empty, I'm like, okay, that's all good now, but you act like you don't have no power to do anything. And that was the part that kind of bothered me, because I saw it, and then the giving the money to, and like you said, it was a setup. Because they know that as soon as they have all this money, that's just going to tear down the organization, because everybody sees, okay, this money, where's the money going to? This, that, other. They made promises that weren't even followed up with. People pledged money that was never received. I'm talking about organizations. This is all documented. So it's being able to point that out and then going to what can coaches do to be able to, is having, first of all, honest conversations. Like, honestly listening to players. When you hear the players having these conversations, they see stuff. They see the same coach that might have called them the N-word and then making a statement about they're against racism. They see that.
Absolutely.
They see the public facade of saying we're anti-this or we're anti-race. I mean, we just had a situation with Sarver in Phoenix. Phoenix made a good statement about against racism, against George Floyd. Then you see the atmosphere that was going on for, I gotta say allegedly, until they finishes their investigation. But the ESPN investigation was good enough for me to be able to see the atmosphere that was going on there. So while all of this is going on, you're saying the N-word here and there, all this misogyny, all this everything that's going on, you make a statement that says we are for humanity, and that's hypocrisy. So being able to first of all point out that hypocrisy, then you got to be able to start from there, because a lot of people were fooled by all of the show.
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack there. I think defund the police has been a term that has been misunderstood
Purposely.
and used purposely to galvanize the other side of the table, to say that they don't want to have less safe communities, and that's scary to them, right? They fear tactics. So that's something that you mentioned. But I also I want to talk about athletes in the locker room, on the field, on the track. What does racism look like in those situations? Explain to us, for those of us in the audience who may not be athletes. We want to understand, how are you experiencing racism if you're a high school athlete, college athlete, professional athlete? What does that look like?
Well, and let me just start a little bit from my perspective as a young athlete coming in. I looked at myself as a kid that was idealistic. What's my role in life? And I found somebody doing some boxing. I got involved in boxing. I found somebody swimming. I got involved in swimming. And then the law enforcement pushed me to track and field. I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is a deep game. And I said, I chose to involve myself in this game. And then when all the dust settled, why am I in the game? I'm in the game for one thing and one thing only, to be in the game and to win the game. But everybody out there outside, sitting in an audience and outside this door, is in the game too. Difference is I selected to go to this game, and you were pushed out into the game. You were pushed into the game of life. But the game of life still is relative to a game of basketball or a game of track and field or a boxing game, because the game of life is about trying to win. We as black people, people of color, we don't even realize that we're in a game. If we don't realize that we're in a game, how in the hell, excuse my expression, are we gonna win?
Thank you.
Our kids go to school, but they don't have no purpose as to why they're going to school. And it's kind of sideways that they don't have any understanding as to why they're going to school, because the trickery that has been taking place so long before, where they told you, son, you're a nice kid, but you're not qualified for the job. You need to go to school. That's what they was telling you in the 50s.
Yeah.
You need to go to school. You go to school, you get your bachelor's degree, you get your doctorate degree, you come back, all of a sudden, we can't hire you because you're overqualified. We can't pay you what you're worth. So now you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. This game has been going on over and over and over again. It earnests on us. What white coaches have done, what the white business is doing, what white society does as a whole. For 500 years, we've been talking about what they did. It's time for us to put a stop to that and start talking about what are we doing. Because now it's time for us to wake up. We haven't even got to the point where, as modern day black people, in terms of your kid can go to school to play basketball, and the coach comes to your house 9 times out of 10, it's a white coach, and they might have a little assistant coach just to come because he meet the color chart. But the deal is, most of the parents, they don't even know how to respond to that white coach when he come there to recruit your kid. They don't know the proper questions to ask. They don't know whether the coach is going to give them any certification guarantees that you're going to stick with my son until he gets his degree or the daughter, for that matter. So until we understand that we're in this game, and we have to be in this game to win, because everybody in this room, I would say, is an adult. Many of them are close to my age. You sit back and say, what's my life all about if I don't do anything to circumvent the young kids coming after me? See, if we don't break the circle that we in, it's just repetitious. And it's been happening over and over and over again. These guys here that started this program, is one thing about these guys, from the time I met them, and I knew Winston forever because he's mine. But if you sit back and you think about how many guys that want to do something that was in it for the moment and was not in it for the movement. And that's a question you need to ask yourself. When something come up, I've seen guys that say, oh man, I'm not really black. What do you mean you're not black? Well, I mean, my understanding is not the same as yours. Oh, why? Because you think you're in the loop. And then the minute you fall out the loop, then all of a sudden I'm the blackest thing going, man. See what they doing to me? I need help, man. They trying to stop me. So we got to understand that we got to each one teach one. Don't be black now because when you was black the day you was born. But you don't want to look at the man in the mirror. There's many guys right now that's in athletics that endure racism, and not only racism, but they endure violence within the sector in which they're involved in. But they have fear. Just like if a white man come and put his foot on my neck on the ground, and he's choking me out, but I have fear to say anything to him because I have fear he might be upset and might be offended that I even approached him that way. We have to step up and start to realize that we have rights. Your kid is not going to just out of the blue, he ain't going to fall out the sky and hit him in the head. This is something you start putting in your kid's mind from the time he's a kid and let him raise with this. Let him go out with his partners and tell his partners, say, man, we do have rights. You know, a girl asked me the other day in the interview, she said, Mr. Collins, Mr. Kaepernick, he took your lead, he did something like you. I said, you know, Mr. Kaepernick is a young man. He's a little older than me when he made his statement. When I made my statement, I was 23 years old. I didn't have 2 nickels that I could rub together. I said, Mr. Kaepernick had $5 million in his bank account. I said, but the difference is this. There is no difference. The fact is that he was a black man and I was a black man. Whether he had money or not, or I had money or not, the bottom line is that we were suffering the same ills of society as a black individual in this world. You have a responsibility to sit your coach down and let him know. Like my coach told me, his wife told me one day in Texas, oh, Delman's gonna do so-and-so for you. And I looked at her and told her, Ms. Brown, the steaks on your table, I'll put them steaks on your table. What you say? I'm gonna tell him, call him over here so I don't have to repeat it. Coach, I told your wife, I'll put the steaks there. When I run and I break these records, you eating good. Don't tell me about you giving me, I'm giving you. And you have to make them understand that. Then if you get, they say, well, he's a bad guy, I don't like him. I can live with all that. The thing that I cannot live with and won't tolerate is the lack of respect that you're supposed to give.
Absolutely.
And that resonates deeply when you talk about reimagining how we define success as black families, black fathers, black mothers. We have to educate our children on what it means to be a citizen of America, and what it means to be a black American. That's pivotal, man. That's so important if we're ever going to assume a more competitive posture in this society. Because what we have to accept is that capitalism is a very competitive game. It's a game of stratification. And ultimately, there's winners and there's losers in this system. And don't be mad at the game. Play the game to win.
Play the game. Got to get the rules.
What did
I just say?
Think about this. Think about the white man out there. You know who he is?
What's he doing?
He's a hunter.
Yeah.
You know what you are?
I'm a hunter.
You're the prey.
I'm a hunter, baby.
No, you are. I'm a hunter.
I'm a hunter.
As the masters of us go, we are prey and we don't even realize it. And then when I confront a white individual and tell him, he said, well, John, I want to get you hooked up to do this autograph session. Hey, man, you sound like a hunter to me. What'd you say? You sound like a hunter. You know what a hunter is, right? A hunter is the guy that seeks the land to find the prey. I say, it looks like you think I'm the prey. In other words, you're going to make 99.5% of the money, and I'm going to take 0.5 and go home, and I'm going to be happy with it. Because as the prey, you're not supposed to know any better. They've been getting us all the time like this. And it all goes back to what he said. It goes back to what this young brother said. It all starts with education.
Absolutely.
Ignorance is the worst thing that could ever happen to us, is be ignorant about self. Educate yourself so you can educate yours.
We have to reinvent education as we know it. The traumas that we have faced through racism, our kids, our educational system, the traumas that we've gone through are one to where we're not ready to receive those resources once we get it. Once we get into college, because of the traumas that we've gone through to get to college, we're not ready to receive those educational prowesses, those resources. So we have to reimagine education along with reimagining everything else.
You know, you guys talk in terms of the coach's responsibility. I'm currently coaching still. I had a chance to coach at the collegiate level. I refused because I didn't want to play the game. I didn't want to play the game. I stopped coaching high schools because I didn't want to play the game. I'm just doing AAU stuff now because I can set my own rules. And I tell the kids, you know, when you're competing as a track, because I had to run against that person right there. Well, we have words, and he was 20, I was like 20, so he was in my ear, and I was barking back at him, you know, a little young kid from the hood. And you know, I tell all my kids now, like, use this tool to get you where you need to go. And on a lot of coaches, and to this day, I said, I'm glad, hopefully there's none of the collegiate coaches that are participating in here, because some of my girls have gone on to college, and one of the coaches told me, oh, they can help me win a championship. I said, well, what about developing them as a person? So, and in high school when I was coaching, the athletic directors would constantly say, well, you're not winning any titles, you're not doing this. I said, yeah, but if I get one kid to go to the state meet, or I get one kid to go to college, I'm doing my job. Absolutely. I ain't got to win no titles to make you happy. No, that's not what the purpose is. The purpose is to get the younger kids to move forward. Because I constantly tell them, look, I'm old. Y'all got to take care of me. That's their job.
That's right.
They got to take care of me. So I'm teaching you what you need to do. And the issue for me is sometimes the younger kids have a tendency to say, well, we know better. You know, I ran into that when I went back to the university at Eastern, and one of the sprinters, I said, look, man, I was able to do this, I was able to do that. I went here, I went there. This is how we got it done. Oh, that's old. We do it differently now. And I'm like, well, shit, I ain't got to talk to you no more. Bye.
You know it.
And so, I think for my generation, I'm a baby boomer. And I'm going to put the ownership where it is. The problem that we're having with the younger generation is our fault. It's our fault. We're the ones that said our kids are not going to have it as hard as we had growing up, and we're going to give them this and we're going to give them that, so they never learn responsibilities. And then you get the coaches that are coaching them in the high school who really don't care as long as they're out there performing, and you know, throwing them that little ducats under the table and sideways, so that they're still not learning. I talked to John earlier, I was going to tell him about the issue with this past Olympic team. And it's not that the U.S. athletes aren't that good as far as track and field go, it's just that they've gotten so hung up in money. That's right. That, oh, my sponsor, who I'm running for, says I can't train with you because it's a conflict. And the biggest example was the previous Olympics when, don't get mad at me, Nike was refusing this one kid who wasn't black. You can't run if you don't wear our uniform. And I looked at it, I said, I wish they would have told me some stuff like that. I would have told them, shove it up your butt there, I don't care. And so our athletes now, sometimes the priority for them is, I got to secure my money first. You know, and they've lost sight of what John and them fought for.
And that's an interesting point, because it's the balance or the dichotomy of I'm going to get my bag or I want to make a statement for my community. And we know it's a competitive game where generational wealth is power in this society.
Right.
What do you feel like the responsibility is? Because we see folks like Kyrie Irving who are outwardly outspoken about social issues. And then there's a lot of other athletes, maybe a LeBron, for example, he's he kind of teeters the line, right? Is there a responsibility for athletes to speak out with their endorsements, their contracts on the line? What do you all expect from them? What should we as a society expect from them?
Well, you think they're leaders because they made it out of the ghetto? They're not leaders, they're still black. I don't care, Jay-Z is a zillionaire, Kanye West is a zillionaire, but they still reflect their ethnic background.
Their race.
Okay?
Right.
They still reflect that. I don't care what neighborhood they move in, I don't care what restaurant they go to, they get the same look that I got. Okay? And here's this, like when I was a kid, and I heard a woman swimming in the English Channel. I was the best bathtub swimmer in the house. I heard this woman swimming in the English Channel. I said, Daddy, what did she swim there at the English Channel for? Did she get a trophy? Did she get her name in the paper? What? He said, she probably gets all. I said, well, Dad, I got a couple of questions. Did she swim with a knife in her mouth? He said, no, why would you say that? I said, well, how did she go to the bathroom? She swimming. I didn't know they let her out the water. I didn't know if they fought off the sharks or what have you. But then I heard about the Olympics. Oh, what's that, Daddy? He said, son, that's where the greatest athletes come together from all over the world, strong of mind and strong of body. Well, Daddy, let me ask you, have they ever had a black swimmer to represent America? No. I'm gonna be the first, Daddy, the first one to represent America as a swimmer. That was my first endeavor in sports, was that swimming. And when my father looked at me and said, yeah, son, I think you can do that. For a year and a half, I trained, got ready, swimming the Harlem River, swimming the Hudson River, swimming the Colonial Pool every day. And one day I could look at my father's eyes and I could see the hurt that he had to tell me something. He said to me, he said, Johnny, we need to talk. My old man was a shoemaker. He's banging them shoes, and I'm standing in front of the petition. And he looks at me and he said, son, you're never going to go to the Olympics as a swimmer. And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean? I kind of pushed back from the petition. What are you talking about, Pop? I'm the best in New York. He said, no, son, you're not going to go. I said, why? He said, where would you train? He said, you can't go to the local pool. Everybody in there trying to cool off. He said, you can't go to the ocean. They trying to swim out there in the water too rough. You can't swim in the Harlem River. You lose 2 or 3 of your friends every summer. He said, where you going to go? And just as he said that, I said, well, we'll join a club. And he said, no, son, we can't do that. And I said, why, Dad? We can't afford it? He said, no, I can afford it. And then he did something I've never seen before. He said, no, son, you can't go. And I said, why? And he said, and when he did that, I thought he was rubbing a bug bite. What he was telling me, you can't go merely because of the color of your skin. And then he said to me, he said, Johnny, when you and your friends go up to High Bridge Pool, which was the white area, and go in that pool, he said, what happened? And my old man made it clear, say, son, I don't go to the pools because I swim just like a rock straight to the bottom. What happened when you go up there? And in my brain, I could see it. As soon as we went and jumped in the water, all the white parents jumped up. Billy, Bobby, Betty, hurry up, get out the water, get out the water. And then while they were getting out the water, we in, and I noticed they putting some cream on them to try and look like me. So I'm sitting back and I'm saying, we're in trouble relative to us being on level ground to get an education, to build a reputation, to even be earnest enough to get an education, okay? If we don't know the game coming in and nobody's standing there with you to see what you see, how can you stand up against it?
You asked a question earlier about what racism looked like in sports in the locker rooms, and Akon definitely talked about the Phoenix Suns, and that example is what it looked like the overt racism that we dealt with. I think one of the things that's different, we started a long talk because my sons were experiencing racism, and it was a political conversation. It wasn't, you can't do this or we think you're this, it was a political conversation. So sometimes the racism now becomes 2 sides of a political aisle. And then there's other code words and it becomes conversation. And these, for me, for my son, it was a kid who we never talked about politics before or race or anything. But it was a response to when George Floyd, some stuff he was posting, this kid, we posted Tucker Carlson. So that was that was my entry point to say, we're not gonna have this, and coach, you need to do something about this. And the coach was unaware. He didn't know what was going on, but more importantly, when he became aware, he started dealing with it. And so whether it's a kid making a comment, exclusion, no representation, all these kids are experiencing racism in different ways, because you also talk about different sports. Right. Now, racism in basketball, because most of the coaches are more comfortable recruiting black families and being around, it's totally different than being the one black on a baseball team.
Absolutely.
In a gym, we've talked to teams where there's no black people. and dealt with racism there just out of their ignorance of the issue at all, to see if anybody wants to go from being a non-racist to an anti-racist, right? That's the conversation, but it's always there, and until we talk about it, it doesn't get exposed in all these different stories, and that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
But I will say too, though, when I watched Kyle's coach's sons at UPenn and at Gettysburg, these white men use their position to go back to the school and say, I got to do something, something has to be different. They can make a choice to activate. And sometimes you have people who are just stuck in neutral who just don't know, that they're not sure. But once you know, are you going to be an anti-racist every day? Or you just post that square? And so we saw the possibility and we seen the snowball effect. But sometimes you just got to push and you got to ask and you got to expect. And it goes back to what you're saying about sometimes people, they don't demand or they don't step up, or we just don't know. We're intentionally taught to not know our power. But we have power as athletes, as businessmen, as volunteers. I had power at my showing up to PTA meetings. I just showed up. They didn't let me sit in the circle. I was the only black father in there. You know what I did next meeting? I got there early and I sat in the circle. So we can exercise our power, but we're taught, don't be that, got to tone it down as a black man. You got to go along to get along. No, we need everyone to rise up wherever you are and expect people to dismantle or show me through your actions.
I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. And I've experienced that. So going up to Syracuse, before I went to Syracuse and I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I got warnings. You can't be talking that stuff when you go up there. You know what I mean? You can't be doing all that militant. I was in speech and debate because I wanted to, write speeches like Malcolm X and debate different topics. They was like, all right, you go up to Syracuse. You can't do all that now. So the first, it's interesting, the first weekend I'm in Syracuse, there's a big protest on campus. The students were protesting, the black and brown students were protesting because the police officers were able to use pepper spray. Isn't that crazy that's what they were protesting? Now all the police officers have guns. It was pepper spray back then. Wow. Because the fear was that when anything happened, they was going to just pepper spray all the black and brown students, which is what happened. That's just, that's the reality of it. And so I'm standing there watching the protest, and I'm next to this other football player, Roland Williams, who ended up getting a Super Bowl ring, and we're standing there, we stick out. So the newspaper takes a picture. It looks like we leading the protest in the front, right? I'm big and he big, we right there, right? So I get a call into Coach Boeheim's office afterwards, and so he said, "I saw the picture of you in the paper and everything like that." He was like, "So you're into?" Asked me a few questions, and I didn't know where this was going. And he said, if that's what your interest is, and I recruited you in high school, so I know what your interest in. He was like, you're not going to get any pushback from me for anything that you stand up for. He's like, but just know that if you say something, make sure you can back it up. Because if it gets really hot, don't look at you, you got to back it up. And then that was it. So I always get the question of, when you was in college, was there pushback? I was like, no, because they knew that that's what I was. And as an athlete, you do have power. Now I'm a freshman coming in, you know what I mean? I ain't done nothing yet. They just went to the Final Four with John Wall and them. I haven't done anything. But as an athlete, and I tell young people this story all the time, you are able to use your power in ways that you don't even know. And then especially if you have a collective group and other people. So I've seen athletes do amazing, the football team at OU, the football team at Missouri, all make stances together when different racism was going on the campus. In Missouri, it was like higher learning up there. Yeah. Like they was having all kind of stuff going on. Nothing was going on. They was calling for the president to say something about it. Nobody was doing anything. Then they connected with the football team. The football team threatened that they might possibly boycott the game. Right? That's all it was. It was a threat that they might possibly. They took a picture with all the people. It was 2 days later, the dude was brought up against the board, and then he was suspended, and then he was fired. I was like, wow, that shows you your power, though. There's just a threat because of the money.
Financial.
Economic.
That's what it is.
Economics.
But also, the other choice in there, it was great that Coach Boeheim didn't push back, but he also could have pushed forward.
Yeah.
He could have aligned with you and said, you know what, I don't think they should have pepper spray either.
Right.
And this is, but here's the thing though, and this is where also the difference is. When we had our first long talk, the whole Syracuse staff was on there, and I told them 100%. Their job is to push forward.
I agree.
And so that's because here's the thing, when you're talking about the issue, it's good when people can say, okay, I'm not going to push back. You feel like that's a victory. Like,
Right.
at least I don't have to fight this one more white person.
That's
Right?
civil
That's
rights,
the
right?
but
That's all
but
we
what
want.
about if I don't have to fight the battle at all? What if it's Coach Boeheim at the protest instead of me, and they take a picture of him? Right? That's what's happening. That's what needs to happen. That's when coaches versus racism kicks in. When the coaches and the leaders, where it's not us talking about how to end racism. Hell, like you said, we didn't create this. But it's for, when you see Greg Popovich stand up, or some of these other coaches, it's about making that the norm.
That's right.
Like that's what needs to happen.
When you talk about the power of athletes, where is one thing? I went to Hampton University, the real HU, the illustrious. We're in DC, I don't care. So I don't hear about students getting pepper sprayed on HBCU campuses. And so the question that I ask is, maybe we should leverage our power and start to go to HBCUs. What about the blue chip athletes who are now going to Hampton, to Howard, to Morehouse, to Spelman, to these HBCUs, and taking that talent to a place where now we're protected, now we're unified? Do we want to see more of that? Why don't we see enough of that?
So let me just say I'll say really quickly, I was just at Howard last weekend. My daughters are watching the Woodard's twins. They're absolutely phenomenal. My daughters play volleyball, and it was absolutely great. But then we went over because they wanted to see about the student protests that were going on. Anybody here knows about the student protests that are going on in Howard?
Yeah.
They're sitting there in tents. And I interviewed 3 of the students just to, help amplify their message. And, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on that shouldn't be an issue. But I do also say that protesting is part of the college experience.
Yes.
They were protesting at Howard for decades. But what they're going through, they shouldn't be having to deal with right now. But I asked them, have any of the athletic teams lent their support to you?
Right.
And they said not as many as there should be. And that was their answer. They just left it at that. And I think that some of the thought has to be taught to young people, young athletes at a young age, the power that you do have. And I think a lot of times, being in AAU, and you can attest to this, parents be messing up young kids' minds.
All day.
Young athletes. Messing them all up, thinking they're all, I don't know what, just like they're all gonna be the next LeBron. They need to have special treatments. It's just a whole different mentality. And I see it mostly coming from the parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I see.
Living.
But once you like teach a young person, young athlete, the power that they do have, it's like a light bulb comes on. But sometimes there's deprogramming that has to happen first. And that's the part where, it's a little bit different than where it was back in the day, because that programming of the economic, like you're gonna only look at this, you're so, and everybody needs to think that they're special, but it's almost like like I said, the next LeBron, you're a prima donna, you need to be, pampered, you need to be, nobody should, it's just a whole different mentality, and I see that a lot coming from the parents.
And I would say also for an event like this though, I mean, I grew up knowing about Hampton University and black colleges, and my parents went there, but also an event like this where a lot of these hoopers, they want to go to the ACC, they want to go to the Big Ten.
Right.
So to see an event where you're getting introduced, a 7-year-old, like what's Prairie View? What's a Prairie View, right? And then there's understanding about it, and so that becomes an option. I grew up there, if I didn't know about Hampton, it was not on TV, it wasn't an option. Absolutely.
That's right.
Important.
That's right.
Question I was actually on. Jim Brown went to Syracuse, right?
Yep.
What was his history there in Syracuse? Did he conform to try to blend in, or did he?
He was creating all kind of ways when he was up in there in Syracuse, and that's the thing, the power that you have when you're the man, you could create ways.
Yeah.
When you're the man, you could push all kind of envelopes.
And the reason I ask is because what he did do, they suppressed it.
Oh no, definitely.
They suppressed it. They didn't want you to know anything about how he dealt with the situation there. That's why the demonstration, and I say not my demonstration, but any demonstration is so much needed, because people on the other side of the world is looking like you, feeling like you, that don't have a clue as to how to come out of this cesspool that they're in. Until they see an individual like Cap take a knee, until they see Jim Brown make a statement. But they always try and suppress them. That's why they made me the most hated man in America, for the simple fact that was the first time that the Olympic Games was universal, worldwide. And it was live and living color, with no 10-second delay. It was right there, they couldn't pull the plug on it. And when America felt like white America, Oh, they pull the screen, they pull the blinds, they let the world see what we're doing to them. Because remember, as young athletes, we represented America, we went around the world. And the thing that they did, they always made sure they made a giant USA on your chest.
That's right.
To represent America when you went out, and what we were as young black athletes, long time before we even had a clue that we were ambassadors for the United States. So in other words, what we were doing, whatever treatment that was expounded upon us, we were endorsing it. Not even knowing that we were endorsing it. Okay? So we got to wake up.
I want to add on what Mr. Thomas said as far as the parents go. We talk about generational things. I've got 3 girls that are coming up for this event. 2 are attending Prairie View, 1 is attending Kentucky State. The reason I bring that up is because when I came out of school in '68, my parents said, no, you cannot go to a black college because basically all you're gonna do down there is party. Okay? Now, 2, 3, 4 years ago, I had one of the top quarter milers in the country out of high school. She had an offer to go to LSU, Purdue. She chose not to go to LSU because she said the girls are too country. Then I had 2 years later, I had another girl. I said her parents graduated from U of M as engineers. I said, well, don't you want to go to HBCU? No, my parents told me I can't get a good education or a good job. So nothing has really changed from the mindset, because that's what my parents said to me. And they're still saying that same crap nowadays. So we got to figure out how we're going to change that.
The narrative.
Yeah,
To the same
and
thing.
that's why I said I got 3 girls here now.
The money follows the athletes, right? So if the top athletes go to these HBCUs, then the money will follow.
After a while.
After a while,
Yeah,
it's
after a while.
delayed.
Yeah,
It is delayed.
You need to. Well, I don't know.
Well, it has
See, I don't think so.
Right?
So I think that if you have somebody like a Zion, and now with social
big-
media,
yeah, okay.
yes, you have to say like social media.
Yeah.
Now social media, these cats have millions of followers and
Yeah.
following before when they're in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that following will just carry on to wherever they
They
go.
go.
Yeah.
Wherever they go.
Well, maybe I'm thinking of it this way, because it goes back to your original point. You also have to have a university and facilities and things that can show me I can become a professional athlete.
Okay.
And so if I go to visit and I'm looking at the gym and I'm looking at the weight room, I'm like, that's not gonna get me to the league.
I got you.
So what I was thinking of the money is that rebuilding to make it a world. We shouldn't have black college sports and it be you gotta take a you gotta
Accept less.
accept
Okay,
less, right? So I'm an 18-year-old. The whole world's looking at me. I'm gonna be a pro, and you want me for my people and for all this to stand up and go work out at this gym. That's not gonna help my personal goals. Right, or a program that doesn't support it. And I'm not saying it's because we haven't been used to having support, that or have the funds to support it. So I was saying the money comes when their stuff
But
gets
I push
rebuilt.
back on that because we have to redefine how we see success.
Personal
as a black
goals.
community.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
If it's your personal goal, you're operating in individualism. And if we're in a competitive society where it's a team sport, we need to tell our kids, look, son, you're black. You need to commit to advancing the black community by going to this school. We will find the resources for you, but you need to be an activist. You need to be a pioneer. And if more black families had that attitude and that outlook, then we'd have a consolidated effort of talent that would be at these schools. And yeah, maybe the money will follow a year later, but when you're winning the national championship as an HBCU or you're making the Final Four, that's gonna make waves.
Well,
It's deeper than that. It's deeper than that in the sense of this. It's all about economics. Okay, when you think about all the Big Ten schools, they spend a tremendous amount of money to go out and recruit these kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
They spend a tremendous amount of money. Why do they spend this tremendous amount of money? Because like when you said that kid said we might not go to the game, we might boycott the game. Well, they thinking right now, if they don't play this one game, that's $3.5 million. Okay? We can't afford. So let's water the thing down and listen to what they say. Let's play the game. Okay? But on the other hand, the black colleges never had the money to go out and recruit these kids. You understand? And then at the same time, I'll go so far as to say it's a lot of black colleges throughout the country that was one of the institutions that were put in place by the same people that run the game.
Right.
Understand? So I'm gonna put you there. I know you ain't about these kids. I know you about yourself and you about money. If the school falls to the wayside because you ain't putting the money where it should be, or recruiting these kids, or pushing them through the education, or making sure that your faculty is doing the right job, we don't care. Because when you ain't doing your job, that makes it even easier for us to get these kids to come to our school, because they think more about economics. We don't think about economics, and most of them institutions that they go to, you got to be a Phi Beta Kappa to come out on your own. Because if you ain't on your books, they ain't gonna push you to be on your books. They're gonna push you to get through that 4 years to make 4 years of economic growth for the school.
Right. That's
And
right.
so many kids get going to these schools, these white schools. When you go back and you do a survey and say, how many of them actually got their degrees?
Wow.
I played 4 years for the institution, and now at the end of 4 years, I got 10 units of badminton. I got 5 units of swimming. I got another track program. You know, so you got everything that amounts to nothing at the end of 4 years. But in terms of what you did, in terms of bringing economic growth into that school, they got theirs.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody talking about that until.
We're running short on time, so any closing remarks on the responsibility of athletes, the responsibility of coaches or parents before we put a bow on this?
Let me just say this.
Go ahead,
I think there's a responsibility on the parents to be able to educate the athletes that the school is going to try to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
And they don't care about your education. They want you there to be able to make more money for the school. And it's up to you to be able to do what you have to do to make sure that you're educated, because they're not going to push it.
We got to create
That-
classes for the parents,
That's
though.
no,
Right.
but that's
No,
the,
go ahead. I got
That's
that.
that's
I
the
got
that's the and I don't want to make blanket statements, but you know, I've seen the coaches come and they say things to the parents, and they're like, "Look, we're going to give your kid a whole lot of exposure." They use certain words, exposure, and they show, "Look at all these great facilities that we've had,
Right.
and the facilities look like professional facilities, like you said. How am I going to get to the pros?" And they're basically selling their university to them. But now with NIL deals, now there's going to be, oh, now we can get you this NIL deal because we have this amount of alumni. So it's all money. Everything, the whole pitch is all about what I can do for you. So a lot of times, absent of that, is that I'm going to make sure that you get your education. That's not even part of the pitch. You know what I'm saying?
Not anymore.
Right,
Not anymore.
right.
I feel that Coaches versus Racism kind of encapsulates what we're talking about, and it sets the stage for us to start encouraging, teaching parents and athletes how to really come to the table to make this happen. I think they've dummied us all down when it comes to athletes, because we're looking for the pie in the sky ideas. But because we have an Eton, because we have a long talk, because we have Coaches versus Racism, we have a podium that we could speak from. And we're actually gathering information from this panel to put stuff together that we could start training our young athletes as well as our college athletes. So,
You know what the marquee was for black athletes?
what's that?
He's a dumb jock. And that went on for
It
100 years.
perpetuated. Yeah.
He's a black athlete, he's a dumb jock. Understand? All he is an athletic tool.
Yeah.
But in terms of him, they say he can't hang his weight in school. They wouldn't even have you go and do the proper study to take the ATC
That's right.
test
That's right.
to get ready to go to college. They would tell you, say, we're going to get somebody to take the test for you.
Whose responsibility is that? Is that the parents' responsibility, or is that the coach's responsibility?
It's both.
It's both. It's both.
I think it's both, but I think it's more the parents.
More the
yeah,
parents.
well,
But we have to go back to the racism in the schools.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That
Parents don't
the
know.
parents are not getting the proper
They don't know.
education because of the trauma that they. I mean, this goes all the way back.
It goes back,
It's
yeah.
almost like which comes first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah, but also but the situation that it is, the parents have to tell you, look, this is the situation that you're walking into.
But many of
So
them
I got to
don't know.
Many of them
argue
don't know.
for this
They gotta
because
know.
this is yeah. Then you're right.
Parents
They
don't,
man, don't
parents
know.
don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
was alluding
So,
to
yeah.
earlier.
Well, many of them don't have parents.
It's
Many of
about,
them.
it's about
Yeah.
education, man. Education of self. If you think nothing of yourself, how you gonna think something of your kid?
Yeah.
To want the best for your kid.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay? And we got to start looking at ourselves in terms of we owe responsibility to build a foundation for our kids.
You know, we're starting in the elementary schools with the Game of Life. We're starting in the middle schools, and they are emotional fitness. It's helping them to understand their emotions and helping them understand how to tackle someone else's emotions. If you don't have this type of training, man, it's it's generally impossible to ask these young athletes to come out of this alive. You know, we're just going on a wing and a prayer. Pops just mentioned the dumb jock. All of us have been referenced, any athlete in here has been referenced as the dumb jock. But I just think about the power I felt when I proved them wrong.
Right.
To be able to stick my chest out and say, hey, I read at a higher level than you, I'm smarter than you, but we have to continue to install that type of confidence because this whole game is mental. If we can't install that confidence mentally, then we're depleted as individuals.
It's just like you said, you were successful because you realized the game.
That's right.
But think about how many brothers fell in the hole.
That's right.
We
That's right.
lost so many brothers because they had a lack of confidence in themselves.
Yeah.
They had a lack of individuals giving them a foundation to stand on. If you don't know yourself, man, how you gonna know how to deal with life?
These coaches, I feel like they've tricked us just like the gangs have tricked us. They show you the juries and the big cars and they say, man, come on, we gonna help you. And they got you killing people. It's, I feel like it's not that far off with a lot of these white institutions and these white coaches.
Especially with football.
Yeah.
They be running everybody into the ground.
Oh, man.
And they end up with no education. And now I'm talking about college level.
Yes, absolutely.
So I definitely agree with that 100%.
Gentlemen, this has been an insightful, candid conversation. Powerful. I salute you guys for the work that you're doing. Coaches versus Racism, we are amplifying Black voices. We are pushing the narrative forward, and this is important work. I hope that this content can be used and repurposed in a very meaningful way. Some of the takeaways that I heard today were athletes, you have the power. Own that, lean into that. Visibility, education is key. Parents, you have responsibility in this. Don't leave the education to the school system. Education starts at home.
Definitely. Sure.
And economics is major. Sports is a game, but it's a business too. So let's leverage our contribution to the game to make sure that we're winning the game of economics. Gentlemen, thank you again. Coaches versus Racism.
Be continued.
All right. Thank you.